this year. One of the things that we do is our initial first day keynote presenter. We honor the legacy of Wayne Pritchard. Wayne Pritchard was one of the early executives of the Soil and Water Conservation Society as it began. He shepherded the society through many years as a key executive, and we honor the work that he did as we made what is our most important to our first day keynote address after Wayne Pritchard. And at our office in Ankeny, Iowa, it's there. Part of it is in his honor, and we certainly appreciate the work that he did. You all have had an opportunity to read in your program the biography of Rick Cruse. We're really delighted that Rick has agreed to challenge us, if you will, on the important challenge that we still face in what's happening on our agricultural landscape and the problems that we face of erosion. We know that things are changing from a climate standpoint. We know that the land is under greater pressure, whether it's farm programs that encourage the planting of more acres, whether it's the extreme rainfall events that we're experiencing, whether it's drought that's happening in some parts of our country. We know that's having an effect on our soil resource, and we know that we're a long way from establishing the type of sustainable land resource management system that's necessary on our lands across not only this country but internationally as well. And Rick has really been looking at that challenge. And we talk about maybe some of the things that are exciting to us now as we look at soil health and how we restore our soils and how we make them more productive and how that works in our agricultural system. But we still need to be concerned for what's happening with respect to erosion, because everything that we do from a building the soil standpoint can be lost in erosion events. Just a couple of things. Obviously, Rick has been a professor at Iowa State University for nearly 100 years. Early in my career in Iowa, I met Rick when he was also a young man. He's had a great year. He also runs the Iowa Water Center at Iowa State University, and it's an organization that again has led the state of Iowa and the Midwest to look at the challenges of water quality protection as well. And among other things, the last thing I'll say in introducing Rick is that Rick is known internationally as the second greatest fisherman in the world. And I'll leave it to him to explain that. Let's welcome Rick Cruse.
Thank you, Jim. I'm honored, deeply appreciative, and very humble for this experience. I'm appreciative of those who have brought me on this path, and many of those who are in the audience today, some of those I've worked with in the past. It's truly, truly a great opportunity. Papa, tell me a story. My 3-year-old granddaughter frequently brings me a picture I've never seen before. Make a story. She, at 3 years old, has 2 rules. One's implied and the other is pretty explicit. The implied rule is that this story has to be interesting and it has to be engaging, or she turns and walks away. The explicit rule is that it must end with happily ever after. Everybody has a rule. Of those, that opportunity is challenging. It can be really challenging, but it's not unlike many of the challenges that we face in our profession. We have to engage people outside of this room because we can't do it alone. We have to make our stories engaging. They have to be interesting or we lose our audience. So with that in mind, I'm going to pose a challenge. I want to see how many of you really have the storytelling capacity. I'm going to show you a picture in my first slide, or next slide, and I want you to create a story. I'll give you about 30 seconds. Okay, we want to see who the storyteller is. But before we get there, I have to ask a question. How many of you are pessimists? That is awesome. The only guy waving his hand over there, Theo, is wondering. Well, you might want to have your blood checked, because there is a guaranteed blood test now that determines whether you have pessimism or not. If your blood test is B negative, you have a problem. Okay, so what do you expect Monday morning? Okay, so back to the picture. Okay, I'm going to show you a picture, develop a story, 30 seconds. Ready, set, go. Okay, this is not fair. I mean, as you see the dots on the page, and I didn't ask Dan to talk about connecting the dots. If we step away from this picture and consider the stories that you have to tell to engage people outside of our group, you must be able to connect the dots. People aren't interested in simple facts. They're interested in relationships. If we can show how the dots are connected, how one critical aspect relates to another, we have a much better chance of telling a story that's both engaging, enlightening, and honest. Connecting the dots is an absolutely critical part of what we do. What I'm going to talk about is really an effort to connect dots. We've talked some about erosion, but I'm going to take us outside. We're going to take a 10,000 foot look at where we are relative to some of the water. A colleague of mine, a friend, is a screenwriter in Hollywood. He sent me his beginning slide, or his opening screenshot for his story. And he sent it to me because I'm engaged with agriculture, the types of things that'll make more sense to you when you see it. And he asked me if I'd review it, see if it makes sense, see if there's anything real red flags. And when I read it, I asked him, I said, can I use it for this talk? He gave me permission, which I really didn't think I could get. But this is the story. This is the story, okay? It's this. Australia's worst floods in decades shut down a key grain port, while the United States signaled further tightening of domestic and global supplies, having fears over surging food inflation. Corn and soybean futures in Chicago jumped to 30-month highs after the U.S. government reduced its estimate of corn and soybeans production in the U.S. and Argentina, where hot, dry weather has begun to take a toll on crops. Estimates of Australia's wheat crop and exports were also cut at a time when there are concerns with U.S. crop due to dry weather. Last year, Russia banned exports after the worst drought in a century, decimated production. This is what he wants the audience to see when they sit down in the movie theater. My question to you, is this going to be, your guess, is this going to be a comedy? Probably not. How about a romance? Now there might be some in. How about drama? Yeah, that's a pretty good shot. Okay, I'm lying to you again. This is not a movie script. This is actual news release from January 12, 2011. This is the new world. This is the new world. $3 corn and lower soybean prices are a concern not for the farmer if you're in the industry that works with ag. But I give you a word of caution. There may be an element of security that's fleeting, but I'm afraid it's going to be fleeting because there's a variety of reasons. And I want you to view this as a means and a way of focusing attention on the absolute importance of our soil and water resources. You have to live under a rock bigger than I live under to not understand what this slide is about. Rising global population. Brian Keating, University of California, has estimated that in the next 50 years we need to produce more feed and food than we've produced since the dawn of civilization. A daunting task. The United Nations has estimated that we will have 3 billion people. 3 billion. How many zeros will be behind the number 3 when we're talking billion? There's 9. 3 billion people are going to enter the middle class in the next year. What does that typically mean relative to food demand? It's going to go up. What's it say about the type of food these people are going to demand more of? What word starts with M and ends with eat? Estimate is that we will have an increase of 73% demand for meat by 2050. Okay, now that's kind of important because if we look at different meat sources, none of them are really efficient in converting vegetable material to meat itself. Beef is 6 to 8 pounds to make 1 pound. What does that tell us about the demand, stress, and so on water resources? Those are just numbers. I'm going to open this story a little bit further on the next slide, and I'm going to make an assumption just so we can identify what a decimal point is in terms of how big this really is. The U.S. meat consumption is about 5 ounces per day. Okay, for this assumption, we're going to assume that these new people eat 4 ounces per day, which is probably high. And further, we're going to assume that it's all beef, and that's not the way it's going to be. But it helps us identify how big this really is. So if they eat 4 ounces a day, that means each day we have to slaughter, process, and have 750 million pounds of meat to meet the growing demand of just rising status level. 750 million pounds of meat per day. How many head of livestock does that mean we must grow? If you do the math, assume we're slaughtering 1,300 pound beef animal, and out of that we get about 700 pounds of beef, of edible material, trims gone. That means each day we have to slaughter 1 million animals. 1,100,000 pound beef cattle to meet that current demand. What does that say about water demand? It's huge. It is huge. If it takes us, how many days, we have any beef growers here, how many days does it take to raise a beef cattle to 1,300 pounds? It depends on if you're on grass or if you're keeping it in a feedlot. Let's do easy calculations, let's say 500 days. Okay, that's probably a bit too much, but we're just putting a decimal point in. That means if it takes 500 days to get each one of these animals to 1,300 pounds, how many additional beef animals must we have on the face of this planet just to meet that rising status? 500 million. If you do the math, if you take that 750 million pounds of meat per day, and if you make quarter-pound hamburger patties, and you make them 1/4 of an inch thick, how high is that stack of meat? How high is that stack of hamburger? Football field? Try close to 12,000 miles. Do the math. What does that tell us about the importance of maintaining, sustaining our soil and water resources? Jim alluded to this. In the period 1982 to 2007, we lost 41 million acres of agricultural land due to urban expansion. Roads, golf courses, homes, 41 million acres. The home state of Iowa, my home state, we have approximately 26 million acres of corn and beans every year. We're consuming that. 14 million acres of that is prime farmland. Globally, and this is also scary, the FAO estimates we're going to lose 7% of our current ag land by 2030. 7%. You know, the additional 2.5 million people need a place to live. In the U.S., John Wiener put me on this. Thanks, John. It's an illustration from the IRS report. Share of land use that remained the same 1982 to 2007. Crop rain. Gosh, what are we worried about? You know, 25 years, we only impacted 22%. 22% of our crop. Another 50 years, another 25 years, and what direction is our global demand going when we are in the global market? Absolutely imperative that we take care of our soil and water resources. Absolutely imperative. Where's this happening? This is also a picture that John put me on, again from ERS, shows areas of the country that's being affected by urban expansion. These are pretty good structural areas. People like to build homes in the same type of land as good farming. My 3-year-old daughter has rules about how to make a story. It might be time that we consider some rules about what ag land needs to be kept as ag land. I'm not pushing rules, but it's something to consider. One thing I hate the worst than being told what I have to do is coming to a table to eat and there's nothing there to chew on. Not a good situation. Worldwide, what's happening to land per capita? We have a fixed amount of land, we have a growing population that's going down, and on that land that's available per person, we still have to grow our food, live, do everything that humans must do. But we can expand. I mean, look at Brazil. Tremendous capacity. Brazil, you can look at different sources, give you different numbers in terms of what the expansion is, but roughly 400,000 hectares, and if you convert that to acres, we're roughly 1 billion. If you're a farmer, you're thinking, yeah, how am I going to make a living with this much expansion going on? Well, Gunnar Fischer, a German scientist, done some work on land use, and I'll show you a slide that he's done later, says that if you do that development, you have to remove about 15% of that land area for infrastructure. Homes, highways, everything that goes in with building an area for ag production, which means we have only 340 million hectares. That is a lot. Let's tell the rest of the story though. Remember we said that the FAO estimates we're going to lose 7% of our world's ag land by 2030? You take 7% of the world ag land estimate right now, you come up with 342 million hectares of land that's going to be lost globally due to expansion in the global arena. Brazil expansion potential just about captures what that loss is. And global demand is going. It's absolutely imperative that we sustain the soil and resources that we have today. The concept of sustainable intensification, that of pouring more on the land that we have today, will work only if we still have the land to farm that we have today. FAO's estimate, this is the top one to come up with, is that 25% of the agricultural land globally is seriously degraded. Degraded to the point that we cannot rely on human productivity or rely on it to feed individuals. But this happens only in countries that are not developed, and where we don't have the technology, we don't have the education, and we don't have the information available to control soil erosion, right? Well, some of you can recognize the shape of that state. This is from a report that Craig Cox and others did with the Environmental Working Group, where they investigated soil erosion rates in the state of Iowa for the year 2007. They used a product that we've been involved with, the Elevated Erosion Project. And the key point here is this up here. 25% of Iowa's row crop acres eroded at 20 to 100 times the soil renewal rate. Soil renewal rate, our best estimate of soil renewal rate, which is about a half a ton per acre per year. 6 million acres eroded at 2 times the tolerable soil erosion rate, which is assumed to be 10 or 5 tons per acre per year. Now we can argue that this is an area that's undeveloped, where we lack the education, where we lack what it takes to control soil and water losses. But I think that argument would carry a lot of weight. That happens only in Iowa, right? Oh, this is Europe. Earth Science Reviews, actual soil erosion rates for tilled arable land in Europe are on the average 3 to 40 times greater than the upper limit of tolerable soil erosion. Now the caveat here is that they have a different number that they use for tolerable. For this it was about 1.5 times greater per year, but that's still faster than development rates. We are losing in more ways than one. The numbers that I just quoted are only for sheet and rill erosion. Anything that you see in here in terms of those channels, gullies, they're not included in those figures. So the figures that I gave you in terms of the soil erosion that's occurring are incredibly conservative. The actual amount of soil that's moving in the landscape is different than our estimate. And I'll bet you my last fishing bowl that they're different than higher. Does soil erosion affect soil productivity? I hate to be Iowa-centric, but I'm going to be again here. This is a plot of thickness of the hay horizon versus corn yield. These are field measured yield and topsoil depth numbers from the 1980s. What happens to the yield, this is corn yield, as thickness of the hay horizon decreases? Corn yield goes down. Surprised? Probably shouldn't be. For two different soil types. This is part of the corn cap project. Actually, Lois Morgan-Wright is leading. She's in back. A graduate student that's collecting data on farm fields. He's taking probes to get topsoil depth, and he's matching those, aligning those with corn yield maps, corn yield figures that are coming from the farmer's combine. Okay, now I want to just use this slide as a talking point and direct your attention. I don't know if you can see there's a green line here. That green line is running from a set of data that was collected in 2012 when we had 14.3 inches of rain. 14.3 inches of rain is not very much. What's happened to the yield of corn as the topsoil depth increases? Yield improved. Better soil, better yields, under stress conditions. That's the first positive thing he said. What happened to yield? Let's take 2010. We had 30 inches of rain. Now that's the red line. Did we see a response in yield on the non-Lakeland farm that this came from when we had lots of rain? Soil quality wasn't that important. It's always important. The point is that we're building resiliency, and the president, the group before this, echoed that point. You've got to have quality soils if you're going to handle distress conditions that occasionally exist and based on projections more frequently occur. Can technology take care of these stresses? I argue be cautious. Be cautious. If we take Formula One, put it on the Indianapolis 500, what do we get? We get what it's built to do. If we take that same car and put it in a package somewhere, what do we get? What do we get if we take $1 billion genetics package and put it where we don't have resources? Technology is a great tool. It is a tool, but it is not the answer. Farmers have the information at hand. A yield map. If technology could overcome loss of soil quality, could compensate for soil quality total, that would be a common fate. That would be a common color. It's not. It's not. Working lands. I heard, I think Jim referred to working lands. Our lands have to work. Today, $3 corn, we think not. Be careful, we don't want to. I caution, $3 corn could be a false sense of security as we look forward, but it is a struggle now. The challenge with how we're managing our our working land, water quality is suffering. Water quality is suffering. Can we do better? I hope so. I think so, and we're trying. So, I want to leave a quick takeaway message and then jump into a very discomforting zone for me. And Jim, you raise your hand and get me to stop as well. Typically there's a clock somewhere so I can see how long I've been rambling. And I was giving a talk one day in a group of farmers, and there wasn't a clock, it was in a tent. And I asked if someone had a clock or a watch so I could see how long I talked. He says, "You don't need a clock, you need a calendar." I got the hint. Takeaway message. Remaining soil and water resources, and I want to emphasize remaining, are critical for global food security. Absolutely critical. They're economically imperative and an economic opportunity for those that have them. They're going to increase in importance. And these resources are not replaceable and have no substitute. Water is marginally replaceable if Mom Nature cooperates with us. Maintaining existing resources is going to require a proactive approach. There's certain professions where you can be reactive, you'll be successful. If you're a football coach and you see what the other team is doing and you come get your team around you, make adjustments, life is good. If you're the captain of the Titanic, you do not have that option. If we're managing the resources that are absolutely required to feed this world, we don't have that option. Failure is not an option. If we fail, the Titanic is going to look like a picnic in the park. Okay, I'm going to step briefly outside of my comfort zone. That is, away from using science to create arguments, and try to stir some discussion, stir some thoughts from you about how we can move forward. Okay, science is going to influence some of the statements that are here. I'm going to try to use logic, Greg's logic, and season it with opinion, and if I don't have a chance to irritate everybody at least once, probably multiple times, then I failed. 3 questions I'd like to raise initially. What evidence exists that we are on a functionally sustainable path? If there is evidence, we need to make sure we keep that evidence and use that to build as we move forward. Everything is not negative, despite what I've been saying. If we're not on a sustainable path, we have a vision of what that path is. My dad once told me, and I heard it here mentioned earlier today, if you continue doing more of what you've already done, you're going to get more of what you finish it. But you've already got it. Do we want more of what we got? My first chance to irritate people is here. Do we have the political will to address the causes rather than the symptoms of our current problems? Let me give you an example. Ethanol has been the scourge of soil and water. Absolutely not. I don't agree with that for a second. I grew up, graduated from college, and bought a house. I was poor. I had a house that needed a door fixed, had a broken window, had a carpet that had holes in it. Could I afford to fix that? No. I had a couple years of raises. You know what I did? I replaced the window, put in a new door, even had my wife come buy a carpet for the house. If we have farmers with a dirt floor poor, how can we expect them to implement conservation practices? Because of the rising prices that were partially associated with ethanol, partially associated with the drought and heat in Russia, I have farmer friends, I have farmer colleagues that implemented conservation practices they didn't before. Now, I know others that took out fence lines, removed trees, bought land they shouldn't, convert to CRP. I think it is absolutely wrong to blame an industry or anything that allows an individual to improve his or her life. The issue is not the industry, it's the choices that are being made. It's the choices that are being made. In the absence of an ag economy, the farmers can afford conservation, woods conservation costs fall back on you and me, taxpayers. It's not a good model. Another one I'll argue is cover crops. The state of Iowa is paying farmers X number of dollars. They have, I don't know how many $1 million to subsidize cover crops. Cover crops are not the issue. The issue is we cannot grow all row crops in Iowa and expect to conserve soil and water resources. It is not going to happen. It just isn't happening. Address the cause, don't address the symptoms. Okay. Did I make anybody mad yet? Okay. Realities of agriculture. As we address this and try to move forward, we have to be aware of these. Agriculture is morphing into agribusiness. Fewer people, fewer farmers control more. This is not negative, this is not value, but it's what's happening. Enterprise size is increasing, culture is multidimensional, business is less so. What's the primary focus of business? Culture, yeah, everybody understands it. Culture is multidimensional. It's people, it's community, it's resources. You have to make money also in agriculture. But it's multidimensional. Farming is very competitive. How many farmers do we have? Any farmers in Am I right in saying that farming is incredibly competitive? It is incredibly competitive. Farmers make money or they don't farm. If you're a farmer, I don't want farmers to answer this, so you think about it. If you're a farmer and you're bidding for land, we have things like rental auctions now. The highest price bidder gets the land. That's not everywhere. It's not almost. As you keep raising your bid, bidding against someone else, what is the first thing to go? It's everything that you might have done that doesn't give you a return on the dollar to help pay for that elevated cost. Farming is competitive, you have to make money. Conservation fits in that envelope of things that don't make money in the short term. Voluntary conservation approaches where investment incentives and benefits are aligned. God, what does that mean? What does that mean? If I own my land, and I plan to own that land for 2 decades and pass it on to my children, the incentive of conservation is the benefit of higher yields in the future. The incentive of conservation is the benefit I get from higher yields in the future. They're aligned. If I have a landlord that says you're going to take care of those waterways and you're not going to farm here, okay, the incentive of me taking care of those grass waterways is the benefit of being able to farm this land. If I've done a rental auction and I happen to be that highest bidder, the incentive of conservation on this land is the benefit of what? Ain't there. It isn't there. It must be aligned, at least that is the full that we get. The majority of harvested land is rented, and conservation incentives and benefits are not frequently well aligned in those arrangements. Markets are farmed, not the land. Markets are farmed, not the land. Farming the market does what in terms of soil quality? It does what in terms of soil conservation, typically? Comes in a second. It's a reality. Remember, it's competitive. And if your neighbor is farming the market, what are you going to do? You don't have a choice. We have a very strong ag and industry lobby. Rationality, rationally not aligned with conservation goals, typically aligned with industry. You know who spent the most money lobbying for the current farm bill? I know you're thinking Monsanto, you're thinking big, Banking industry. Banking industry. The biggest bank investment came from crop insurance subsidiary. Big bank. Now, why that's important when we're dealing in a political environment that's fiscally austere, and you have lobbyists that have lots of money pushing towards you, and you have a little conservation area over, what's going to get cut? What's going to get less attention? It's just common sense. You can't put conservation part of the farm program in the same bill where you have all these other high pressure, high dollar lobbying efforts and expect you're going to come out well. Major policy elements are not well aligned with soil conservation and water quality. What did direct payments do for us in terms of crop diversification? What did direct payments do for us in terms of the need to keep your crop base up? What does crop insurance do for you if you're guaranteed an income? And I'm not knocking this, everybody wants a guaranteed income. But if you're guaranteed an income for doing one thing, what incentive is it? What is the alignment of incentives and benefits associated with conservation? Soil erosion science is weak. What's some of the best soil erosion people in this week? We got Seth, we got Janice, we got Brian, we got some of the best that exist here. But it's still weak. Compare what we can do with soil erosion research to the knowledge of the corn genome. We're still in the Stone Age. We got to get better. We don't have the funding. We don't have the resources. Do the best we possibly can. It has to get better. And it is. It is. Bell-shaped curve. We have some farmers who would absolutely die for conservation practices. That is their number one thing. But we have some over here that do everything they possibly can to capture that almighty dollar and let everything else go by the wayside. Well, why is this important? My dad told me once, he said, in a game with no rules, the most aggressive and least ethical individual is the one that determines how that game is played. In a game with no rules, the most aggressive and least ethical individual is the one that determines how that game is going to be played. And you've got some woman or man over here that's farming that will farm right up to the river bank, take out the grass waterways, farm up and down the hill on a field that should be pastured to goats. How can this person over here compete if they're willing to do the right thing in those areas? What it's basically doing, Pete Nowak and Max Stemp published a book on land management for conservation, I think water quality, not too long ago. Within that book, they made a point that the bad actor is having a disproportionate impact on water quality, which water quality, water rules. I'm going to make a stronger statement. I'm going to say that that individual is having an impact on those that want to practice conservation because they cannot economically compete with them. Farming is incredibly competitive, and farmers have to make money. So what's new as we wind down? We see an increased watershed focus, increased culture, trying to build back in, trying to build peer pressure. And peer pressure works to get more conservation practices used. We have industry recognition of sustainability issues. We saw that in the section before this. Industry recognition of sustainability issues. If I'm a company that's selling seeds, and I want to sell all the seeds I possibly can, if I see soils that go to the point where farmers say, I'm not going to farm that anymore, what economic incentive does a company have of keeping that land in production? There might be something there. Food industry is talking the talk. Walmart. Will they walk the walk, or can they walk the walk? That's something to be seen. Farmers are vocalizing the R word. I give multiple farm presentations, and early this spring, in January, I gave 3 in Iowa, the integrated crop management, and I was dealing with soil erosion. It was a different talk from this. We're talking about rates of erosion and what's happening, and at the end, two of the sessions, in groups of farmers, one guy raised his hand and said, we need rules. He says, I'm damn tired of competing in an unlevel playing field. I've got a neighbor that does this, 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 and this. I'm not going to do that, but I can't compete with it. Very similar story in another talk. People are tired of competing against those. Remember the exploiter on that curve? Want something a little different. Do they like more rules? Absolutely not. A group on a farm, regulation. I don't even want to go there, but we have an increased emphasis on cover crops. Is it fad or will it be reality? I saw the 3 farmers here, with Dave, Brian, and Brent. Very positive, but also very cautious. I remember the no-till thing. As no-till was being introduced, one mistake would cause 10 people not to try. However, it is gradually catching on, and I mean gradually being implemented. What's not new? Increased specialization on the landscape, loss of cultural-based management skills, and increasing reliance on technology. I have a farmer in southeast, southwest Iowa, Seth Watkins, great individual, very integrated, very complex system. He has 7 different income streams. And I asked Seth, I said, Seth, isn't this a model that others might want to implement? I mean, you diversify your risk. He says, I'm not in the insurance program, yes. I said, Jim, she thinks this is work. He says, if a farmer can't grow a garden successfully, how can they do this? Going back to the office, and I told a colleague there about it, a young lady, and she says, she starts laughing. And I said, what are you laughing at? She says, you know, my husband and I, we farm. I said, yeah. She said, 3 weeks ago, we're sitting at the breakfast table, and I told him, I said, we need to get the weeds out of our garden, or we're not going to have anything. He said, don't worry, I'll take care of it. She said, you know what he did? Sprayed him around. It's not funny. Well, it is. But we're losing our opportunity. Well, we're struggling now with Roundup Ready resistance. Would we still have that if we integrated cultural management along with that technology? I suspect we would. Growth in size and operation of equipment, government policy, and conflict with conservation. Degradation of soil and water resources, we're still headed in the wrong direction. So what are the elements of the fix? We have to have a goal and a plan, and that goal and plan has to last longer than a farm bill that lasts 3 or 4 or 5 years. Soil and water is long term. Political agendas are not. We have to have a commitment to those goals. We have to understand that agriculture and agribusiness are different, and they respond to different buttons. Policies that do not put conservation-committed farmers at a competitive economic disadvantage. And we have to have the political will, the guts to stand up to address the problem and not the symptom. We can't tolerate exploitation at the expense of conservation. If this profession is truly going to make way for conservation, we cannot be passive. We have to be proactive. It's on our shoulders, it's on your shoulders. Speaking only to the choir is not going to be this where we've got to go. I wish you a grand conference, and I hope there's not too many pessimists that exist in this group right now. Be happy to address any questions. And before I'm done, Jim, I'd like to make one announcement, but we can do that later. Okay. In April this coming year, I'm convening a section of the conference of the European Geophysical Union in Vienna, Austria, on land degradation, agriculture cause and impacts. Looking for people that are interested in giving papers. The end in April is a great place to be. Yeah, if you have an interest, please let me know.
Let's thank Rick